BMW was well ahead of the game when it launched the i3 back in 2013. It had a completely bespoke electric platform, a carbon fibre tub, distinctive styling, 50 kilowatt rapid charging and sharp handling. It was like nothing we had ever seen before. But the thing is, that was almost a decade ago. And since then, we've seen very little from BMW's i brand. Okay, we've got plug-in hybrid versions of the 3, 5 and 7 series, as well as most of BMW's SUVs. But in terms of pure electric, not so much. But that is all about to change. Over the next few years, we're going to see a whole host of battery electric BMWs. The first in line is this, the BMW iX3.
Unlike the i3, which was built as an electric car from the ground up, the iX3 shares almost all of its hardware with the petrol, diesel and plug-in hybrid version of the X3 SUV. Like Mercedes has with its EQC and Volvo with the XC40 Recharge, BMW has ripped out the engine and replaced it with a big battery and an electric motor. The result, BMW says, is 282 brake horsepower and, coincidentally, a 282-mile official range. Unlike many of its rivals, there's only one motor, so despite appearances, the iX3 is rear rather than four-wheel drive. Performance is sprightly, if not class-leading, but more on that later. Before we crack on, make sure you're subscribed to the Driving Electric YouTube channel and you've hit the bell icon so you're notified when new videos go live.
Now, we can't actually start this review without at least referencing the fact that the car you see here isn't actually even the one you're able to buy, certainly not if you place an order right now. You see, the iX3 is new, but the X3 has been around for a few years now, which means that the time has come for a little midlife facelift, a little nip and tuck. So the M Sport and M Sport Pro versions of the iX3 that you can buy now, they can get different lights and different bumpers. But pleasingly, everything under the skin, the batteries, the motors, all that kind of stuff, and the interior, that is not going to change at all. Now, you're either going to love or you're going to hate this interior. It's really simple, it's really logically laid out, but it is a little bit dull. You see, BMW cabins haven't really changed in the last 5 or 10 years, which means it doesn't have the wow factor of a modern Mercedes or a Tesla. The screen graphics are really sharp and it's super responsive to use as well, and you still get this brilliant iDrive controller down here, which controls all of the infotainment system. It's really easy to use on the move. That kind of simple nature is mirrored by these big rotary climate controls and the crystal clear dials. Quality overall is excellent as well.
Premier Edition and Premier Edition Pro cars have now been replaced by BMW's usual M Sport and M Sport Pro trims. Prices are high for the time being, starting at around £60,000, but for that you do get 19-inch wheels, a panoramic roof, and electrically adjustable heated front seats, plus 3-zone climate control and that excellent infotainment system. Upgrading to M Sport Pro brings niceties like a Harman Kardon stereo, acoustic glass, bigger wheels and extra safety kit, all for around £3,000 more. Full specs can be found on the Driving Electric website.
In the back, you might expect space to be restricted. It's a problem that plagues a lot of cars that have been converted from petrol to electric, but actually, thankfully, that's not the case. Sitting back here, unless you're well over 6 foot tall, you're not going to be struggling for knee room or headroom. I've got loads of space and I'm just over 6 foot. You do get a hump in the floor, but because the middle seat isn't too raised, it's not too much of an issue. You do get that 3-zone climate control that we mentioned earlier, which means people in the back can set their own temperature, a couple of USB slots down the bottom, and an armrest in the middle with a couple of cup holders.
Another area where you might expect a compromise on is boot space, but again, BMW has done a good job in limiting the sacrifices necessary in the switch to electric. While the iX3's boot is 40 litres down on the diesel, it's 60 litres bigger than the X3 plug-in hybrid. All in, it's a decent shape and size, and there's room under the floor to store the charge cables. Speaking of charging, the BMW keeps pace with rivals here too. Those wishing to charge at home can do so in just under 12 hours via a 7 kilowatt wall box, while topping up at a 150 kilowatt public rapid charger allows for a 10 to 80% charge of the 80 kilowatt hour battery in 27 minutes.
Now, we mentioned that official 282 mile range a little bit earlier, and surprise, surprise, it is a little bit optimistic. But given the fact that this car is considerably lighter than, say, a Mercedes EQC, and the fact that it's rear-wheel drive rather than four-wheel drive, it's actually surprisingly efficient, more so than you might expect. Over the last 200 odd miles, we've been averaging between 3 and 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which is about 220 to 250 miles of real-world range. Of course, that relies on you leaning not too heavily on this car's near 300 brake horsepower, which is right there under your right foot. And okay, that might be a little bit easier in some of this car's more comfort-focused rivals. This is a BMW, it's the ultimate driving machine, and it just encourages you to drive with a little bit more vigour. I mean, it's actually pretty good fun. It's not much body roll for an SUV, the steering is sharp and it's plenty quick enough. 0 to 62 miles an hour takes 6.8 seconds, and this being an electric car, all that power is available instantly. It's all well and good talking about what this car's like to drive a bit faster, but the truth is that most people are going to use this car at slower speeds and taking the kids to school or going to the shops. And the good news is that it's just as adept and just as capable in those situations as well. The ride isn't perfect, not least because of this car's 20-inch wheels, but it's controlled rather than being particularly uncomfortable, and it's really quiet as well. That's partly thanks to this car's acoustic side glass. The regenerative brakes are fantastic. They're perhaps not as aggressive as an i3's, but they're strong enough to allow for one-pedal driving. And what's more, with this car's countless sensors all around the car, it can draw itself to a stop just ahead of the car in front. It's clever stuff. Do you know, before I got in this thing, before I'd driven it, and before I'd got under its skin, I'd kind of written it off as another one of those botched petrol to electric converted family SUVs that compromises on either space, weight, or a mixture of the two. But in reality, the iX3 is actually really well resolved. It's big enough inside, it's good enough to drive, it's pretty efficient, and if you can forgive that lofty price tag, it actually offers loads of kit and some pretty fancy tech. So if you're after something that feels familiar, after an electric SUV that just doesn't feel too far from what you know, this could be it.
Head to DrivingElectric.com for all the latest electric and hybrid car advice, news and reviews, and check us out on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Finally, while you're here, make sure you hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel and turn on notifications to ensure you never miss a video.